Hello and welcome to my short introduction video on the geology of Arran. This is an online course I shall be running for the Natural History Society beginning of the middle of May. And this is just a little intro to show you what the course intends to cover. And so yes, Arran, a little island in the Firth of Clyde, 20 miles long by about 10 miles wide, with a very simple road network, one road following the coastline pretty much, with a couple of other roads coming across the lower half of the island there. And why Arran? Well, I missed out on a school trip when I was about 13 years old to Arran, so I've always wanted to go and see the place. And then I got interested in geology, kept seeing mention of Arran and reading about it. Found out there was an awful lot to see in terms of rock types and structures on the island. So decided I would have to make the effort to visit now. So I went for the first time in 2009, and I've been back further 7 times since then, and bumped into numerous university students doing their geology fieldwork from all around the country coming to Arran because it's such a classic locality, this sort of things. So I've then been involved in running 3 field trips to the island, week-long field trips where there's about 5 days of field work and a day off in between to do what you want. And so started looking into the geology of the island and amassed a small collection of literature on the subject, ranging from the 29p leaflet from the Tourist Information Shop, which is actually very, very good, to the Geological Association guides and the Geological Survey memoirs and things. So there's an awful lot of information there. The island was mapped by Gunn and Geekie in the late 19th century, and the map's little changed since then, the geological map. This one stated 1987, but it marks it as being surveyed by Gunn and Geekie, so I don't think it's been surveyed. The survey results have been updated. But it's such a special place that the Geological Survey produces an actual individual geological map just of Arran. Most of the country is covered by maps following grid squares, basically. And a few areas of special geology do have their own maps, and Arran is one of them. But it's a little bit complicated for most of what we'll be doing. I'll use this in the course to show details of some of the places we go to, but just as a general overview, it's a much more straightforward map. And if you look at the key on the lower left, what we do in geology is start with the oldest rocks at the bottom and work up to the youngest. And here we start at the Cambrian. Some evidence that there might be actually pre-Cambrian rocks on Arran, but these Cambrian rocks are what we call Dalradian schists. So those are a metamorphic rock, and then there's a little bit of Ordovician rock around them as well, which again are slightly metamorphosed rocks as well. And at the top here, the red stuff, the tertiary, that's about 58 million years ago. The Cambrian stuff's 500 million years old, around about there. And these tertiary rocks, the red rocks, there's all igneous. So there's granites and lavas and things like that are all these red rocks. And all the ones in between, the Devonian, Carboniferous, Permian and Triassic, they're all sedimentary rocks. So we've got large amounts of metamorphic, igneous and sedimentary rocks, so excellent for learning about geology. It doesn't actually stop at the Triassic. There are some Jurassic and Cretaceous rocks, but in far smaller quantities. But we'll come to those in the course. Okay. So day 1, or session 1, I'd intend to cover the Cambrian Ordovician, these metamorphic rocks. And like Britain, the oldest rocks in the northwest, youngest rocks in the southeast. So we start up at the northwest and look at what's been happening through the periods in which the rocks on Arran have formed. Starting way below the equator, actually further south than this little diagram shows. We're much closer, I think, to the South Pole than it indicates. But during the Devonian, the Carboniferous and Permian, we cross the equator before moving up to its present latitude. And these drifts across the equator, significant in the rocks we see on the island. Going back to the oldest stuff, we'll go up to this point here on the far north, Newton Point, right where the green meets the blue. Now that's the Cambrian meeting Carboniferous, big gap in time there. Newton Point, it's possibly one of the most significant places on the planet in terms of the history of geology. And the reason for that is this gentleman, James Hutton, often regarded as the father of geology. And in 1787, he was sailing around the island with his colleagues looking for evidence that would prove that the age of the Earth must be far greater than 6,600 years, which is what the church was telling everybody at the time. And he thought geological processes took much longer than that, and wanted to find evidence to support that. So he went with some colleagues and sailed around the British coastline, parts of it, looking for evidence for this. And the first place he found was here. This is Newton Point. And what he saw from the boat was these rocks here dipping towards the shore, and back behind where I'm taking this photograph from, those rocks would continue further around the north of the island. But further south of here, just further south of here on the shore, we had these rocks exposed and in the cliffs behind, dipping completely the opposite way. And so if you come to this point, you can see the contact between these different dipping rocks. And these rocks now we know are these Cambrian schists, and these ones on top are Carboniferous rocks. So a huge time period between the two. And he argued that for these rocks to have been laid down, turned to rock, tilted, uplifted, eroded, submerged again, new sediments laid on top, those to be buried, turned to rock, uplifted and eroded again, couldn't possibly have taken place in a shorter period of 6,600 years. We found other evidence in Jedburgh and Sicker Point the following year, so those are his second and third conformities. Sicker Point, probably the most famous one, or certainly the most famous one, but this was the first one, so this I think would be considered the most important spot on the planet for geology. And now as we come around the coast here and we follow onto the shore at Imica, we see some more of these Cambrian rocks, and what we have is a lot of folded schists on the shoreline there, and there's some veins of quartz running through some of these areas as well. But all the way along this coastline, this folding of the metamorphic processes, a lot of this dipping as well. So lots of evidence for that. Not quite the oldest rocks though, because part of this folding has made a large anticline in the north of the island, and in the center of this anticline, which is basically a fold in the rock, the oldest rocks are in the center, and they're exposed here where these geology students are looking at this surface. This is an old slate quarry on the island where they manufactured slate for, or produced slate for local use there, and these are probably the oldest rocks on the island. If you move off to the east a little bit, following the main road, there's a car park and a bridge over a river, and if you walk downstream from there, you come to some purple, well, the Ordovician band in the bed of the river in North Glensonics. And what you see there is this structure, this big outcrop in the middle of the river and in the banks here. And if you look closely with the eye of faith, you can make these out as sort of egg-shaped structures. And these are actually pillows. These are pillow lavas, altered pillow lavas. They've changed a little bit, but they're still pillow lavas. So these were formed by lavas extruded on the ocean floor during the Ordovician times. So these are our Ordovician rocks. There's some other Ordovician shales and things a little bit further downstream there. And then eventually you come to some Devonian rocks. And that's some of the Ordovician stuff. So that would be session one. Session two would go through the Devonian, Carboniferous and Permian, concentrating on this little section of shore here by Corrie. If you start to the north of Corrie, you're in Devonian rocks, and walking along the coast for about 500, 600 meters, you go through the entire thickness of the Carboniferous and into the Permian. There's no unconformities here, so it's the entire sequence that you're looking at there. And so what do we see? Well, Devonian, we were south of the equator in sort of desert zones, so we've got a lot of red sands, the oxidizing conditions in the deserts. But these were deposited from rivers, so we're not in the midst of a desert, but the sands are certainly indicative of an arid climate. And there'd be periodic flooding, and in those floods, a lot of debris would be brought down, coarser material, pebbles, forming conglomerates, and that's what all these pebbles are here. These aren't on the surface, these are in the rock. So we've got an awful lot of these Devonian conglomerates here. And this is the start of Corrie here. This is the northernmost house in Corrie, I think. And you just continue along the shore here till you get into Corrie itself. And there's this little old harbour at Corrie. Now, this harbour is not natural. This was formed by them digging out carboniferous limestone, quarrying out carboniferous limestone for burning in lime kilns, essentially. And the rocks here, they're dipping up the hill, down towards the shore. And if you go up a little track up the hill here, you come to some caves in this same limestone that was quarried out for the lime. And in the roof of this cave, in the roof of the cave, we can see these structures. Now, these are actually the bottom of Gigantoproductus, the brachiopods, carboniferous brachiopods. These are about the size of your fist, and they're living in, this is a life position. And so you see the density at which these organisms used to live. And there's several layers of these within this limestone. Not the only fossils in the Carboniferous. Right round to the north end of the island, still in the Carboniferous beds, we've got these famous things. And what we have here, you can see where the hammer is. The hammer head, there's a line of little marks running off across the screen and then curving down a bit. And by the handle, there's another set running off parallel to the other ones running down. These are the famous myriapod tracks, little sort of creature that scuttled around on the mud on the shore of a lake or something, and on the seashore, and just left tracks which have then been preserved. There's Carboniferous, there's coals very close to this outcrop as well. But these have appeared on numerous wildlife programs, Life on Earth and things like that. So very significant spot in the Carboniferous again. But you continue down through Corrie and you come just to the houses on the southern edge of it, and the shore is all these red rocks. And what we have here are Permian sandstones. So, and these are desert sandstones. These lines here are what we call cross stratification, and they're quite high angle, and these are the remnants of old sand dunes. And as winds have changed direction and things, and the dunes have migrated, they've been chopped off and new beds have been laid down. And these continue on right down to Brodick, way down round about here and a little bit beyond. So huge amount of these Permian desert sandstones, again the redness due to the desert sandstones. Interesting features here as well. This little structure here, this circular thing here, you can't see it really clearly here, but in the center of it there's like a little star-shaped pattern. This is what we call a fulgurite. This is actually a fossilized lightning strike. So in Permian times, and this is a desert sand, there was a lightning storm, and where a lightning bolt hit the ground here, it fused the sand grains together, and that made this more resistant to erosion, so we can still see it now. Fulgurites formed today where the lightning strikes hit the ground, but this is a Permian one, not a bit of shoreline. Okay, we'll continue now down to the south coast, and in the purplish area here, we're now into the Triassic beds, and also some of these red igneous tertiary rocks. But the Triassic beds, Kildonan right on the south coast, where we used to stay for these field trips. We based ourselves at Kildonan, mainly for the view. But, Kildonan, these are these Triassic beds, horizontal thin sandstones, not very hard wearing. Little waterfall here. But within these beds on the shore, you can find these things. And this is a reptile or amphibian footprint from the Triassic preserved in the sandstone. There's loads of these on the island in the Triassic beds, but unfortunately these beds, they are quite soft and they erode quite quickly, so they won't last for a long period of time, but new ones are constantly being exposed. So that's just on the shore right in front of the hotel. Okay. And here's another one, a little bit of coastline, a bit harder to see, but you can see the claw marks a bit more clearly here on this footprint here. So that was this Triassic land creature. And this is, whoop, go back one. This is the view from above Kildonan, looking down to the shore. So these footprints were in this sort of area here. But these linear structures divide up this piece of coastline, and these are igneous dikes. This is the Isle of Pladda, which is an igneous sill, and these dikes make up a huge amount of the coastline. About 10% of the width of the island is made up of dikes, so miles worth of dikes width-wise across the island. When they were intruded in tertiary times, the best dike swarm in Britain, if not Europe, if not the world. And here's one of those dikes on the shore at Kildonan, looking out towards Pladda. We can see the sill on Pladda there, the lighthouse, and there's a volcanic sort of plug in the background, which is Ailsa Craig. Okay. And some of these Triassic rocks you find baked up against the edges. Here we've got some here against the dikes where the dikes are intruded. And here's another one of the dikes heading off from Kildonan towards Pladda. Ailsa Craig's moved, it seems to do that a lot. It's on the right hand side now, but there we go. So a lot of these dikes here, and the different composition, size, direction. So a lot of good information there. So we've gone on to the igneous rocks there, these tertiary rocks 58 million years ago. These are all associated with the opening up of the Atlantic Ocean. So potentially it could have opened up through here. And in the northernmost part where Goat Fell is, the core of the island is this northern granite. So we'll have a look at that. This is going up Goat Fell. We've got Broddock down here and the Holy Isle here. Ailsa Craig's, I think, just showing up, I think, just about there, I think it is. But what you can see here, this is granite, and it's got what we call mural jointing. This is a classic form of jointing you find in old granites, in Cornwall, in Devon, whatever, granite tors. And you get this classic sort of jointing. So this is just coming up to the summit of Goat Fell. And this is looking north from Goat Fell to Kievar, I think it is, and then this is the Witch's Step and Little Goat Fell, and all of these are granites. All of this is granite. It's hard-wearing central core of granite. All these valleys and things have been cut out by glaciers. But this highest ground on Arran is granite. But the granite is intruded into these old Cambrian schists, and where we saw the Ordovician pillow lavas downstream from a road bridge in North Glensonics. This is upstream in the same stream, and here we've got those Cambrian schists in the foreground, but where Paul's standing there, that's actually granite. So we've found the contact between that central granite in the north and the schists. The next igneous area is the central complex, and there are some granites here, but they're not straightforward. There's a whole load of other things going on in here, and it's been inferred to be a collapsed volcanic caldera, and as part of the collapse, the overlying rocks before the eruption have collapsed. Some of them have collapsed into the volcano, and this is where we find the youngest rocks. So we've actually got some Jurassic and Cretaceous rocks in there. Not really sort of, I suppose half call them an outcrop because they're not in situ, having collapsed into the cavity, so they're not where they originally were. They'd have been above all of these Triassic rocks, which we've had a cover over the top here. But there are small areas where you can find those in the central complex. This is the central complex on the left here. These are the granites, and in the middle bit we've got that mishmash of all sorts of things going on there. Not as much rock exposed. It's quite heavy going. There's no footpaths and things running into there, so it's a bit tricky to sort of get into there, but we've managed it. And this is one of these areas. This outcrop, the upper layer is the lava, and then underneath it, where it's been hollowed out, that was actually a chalk, a Cretaceous chalk, which was baked and hardened, and this has been quarried out. They used this to produce lime. So there used to be a track down to the main road down here, and around this side hidden as well. It's all was quarried out for the lime in that area there. Further over on the hill, we've got these green and reddish shales here, and these are some of the Jurassic rocks that are in the area, and a few more Jurassic shales there. But hard to find and not extensive by any means. In association with the volcanic eruptions, we've got a lot of what we call breccia, or agglomerate, fragments blasted out and then forming layers which eventually solidified. So we find these on that same area. But the best thing about being up in this lot is actually the views you get of the northern granite area. So that's Goat Fell, and the area around Goat Fell, and again, all from that central complex. But very heavy going trying to find things, and very difficult to sort out exactly what's going on there. And in the southern area, we've got all these red bits, and these are sills and dikes, so igneous intrusions. And this locality here at Blackwater Foot, that's actually in some of the Triassic rocks, but it's got a lot of these igneous sills around it. And the most famous one is probably the Drumadoon Sill, just north of the golf course. And there's lots of fallen blocks here, so nice and easy to examine what the structure of these things are without getting up to the dangerous face of the rock. And there's also at Blackwater Foot, there's some fell sites, another igneous rock, but quite peculiar. A lot of it's quarried for roadstone, but it's got these peculiar little scallop shapes in it in places on the shore here. Not sure what causes them, but we think it must be due to some form of process in the cooling of the magma. On the other side of the island, we've got Clarklands Point, and at Clarklands Point, there's another sill outcropping in the red igneous material there, cutting through the Permian rocks. And at the top of the slope here, you can see the columnar jointing again in this sill. That's the Clarklands sill. But below, we've got some more columnar jointing, and this is another sill, but this one's a bit unusual in this, that it's composed of this material, which is pitchstone, Arran pitchstone. Now this is almost obsidian, it's almost glass, almost volcanic glass. But if you look under thin section, it's actually got some tiny little crystals growing in it, and it doesn't break with a conchoidal fracture, which is what you get with obsidian, but it still does break and produce lots of sharp, really sharp edges. And it was used in the Stone Age for making tools, their version of flint, basically. But it's so unique to Arran that in archaeological digs and things on the mainland, they can come across tools made of this, and they know that it's come from here on Arran. It's either been traded or transported across from here. So really interesting rock. And then there's some other igneous things that great features just off the coast. We've seen this on some of the pictures before, the Holy Isle in the bay here. This is all an igneous intrusion. A rebecite trachyte, I think is what it's called. You get some nice views of this if you do the Waverley boat trip, the last ocean going paddle steamer in the world. It regularly visits Arran in the summer, and here it's going around the Holy Isle, and you can see the columnar jointing in these sills on the Holy Isle. And here's actually on the Holy Isle. You can get a tiny little boat, takes you across the bay, drops you off, and then you can walk a nice path right up to the top, and then you come back down and complete going back to the start again along the shore there. And there's some Permian rocks underneath here as well, but the interesting stuff here. And it's similar to some of the things they found on Arran itself, and they believe that it's probably an offshoot of something from there. And it's also similar to some of the stuff on Ailsa Craig. Interesting valleys, the glacial valleys. Here's one, Glen Rosa, which comes up on the Rosa waterfront, which drains the valley alongside Goat Fell and drains into the sea at Brodick, northern Brodick. And if you go up there, you can see you're crossing all sorts of different rock types. And here's, we have this view from the top of Goat Fell of the Witch's Step, which is again from the Glen Rosa. And the Rosa water comes down here and flows through this gorge. Now, this gorge neatly lines up with the notch in the Witch's Step. And that's because the Witch's Step is actually an eroded out igneous dike which comes down here and is actually eroded out, the same dike eroded out to form this gorge. So this is all granite intruded into the, well, a variety of different rocks, but in places it's intruded into those old Cambrian schists again. And here on the little tributary of the Rosa water, we have granite, and alongside it, these are those Cambrian schists. So we actually found another contact point in that little stream there. A bit awkward to get to, but worth it. Another valley, classic glaciated valley at Glen Sonnex, and you can see here, nice U-shaped valley there, and Sonnex water, the river running up here. And this was quite an important source for barytes. There's barite mining here. There's several veins of barite cutting across here, lots of faults running through here as well. And this is some of the barite exposed in a vein that actually crosses the river. You can see this sort of radiating pattern of the barite crystals. So we'll talk about that and some of the other sort of economic geology of the island, as well as those topographic features, landscape features that we see in terms of the glacial features and raised features and things like that. So hopefully that's given you a taster for what the course will cover. This is us leaving Arran, unfortunately. This virtual field trip, I suppose. But hopefully it's given you enough of a taste of what the course will include, and potentially make you want to visit the island yourself. It's about a 50-minute boat trip, very easy to get across there, relatively cheap now to take your car across. So well worth a visit. Okay, well, I hope to see some of you on the course in the middle of May. It's a 5-week long course, but there will be a break at week 3 because it's on a Monday evening. It'll coincide with the bank holiday Monday, so we'll have a break then. Okay, bye for now.